Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Awareness Podcast with your host, Bill Free. And my guest this week is Jenny Sheehan. And welcome, Jenny, and thank you for being on the Awareness Podcast.
Hi, hello. I'm glad to be here.
Well, just so you all know, I mean, of course, most of you know that the Awareness Podcast has four hosts: myself, Susan Telford, Cindy Krupp, and Jackie Greggs. And this is our new presentation for the Teachers of God Foundation, and it's also supported and sponsored by Pure Presence Conferences. And we have a rotation of hosts that are part of this podcast, as you know. And I had Francis Lucille the first month, and then I had Jonathan Robinson, who are both spiritual teachers, and they're very familiar with this format. Well, Jenny is not. She's not she's not a broadcaster. She's not a well-known spiritual teacher, but she is. Jenny was one of my co-hosts for the Rupert Spira book study group that we're doing right now, and the book that we're following and we're sharing is called Being Myself. And we have a lot of people that are in that book study. Almost 2,000 people are registered, and there's about 200 of us that meet once a week for that book study. And Jenny, being one of the co-hosts, she and I were talking in the green room before we went live for our book study a couple of months ago. And as soon as she started talking a little bit about her backstory, I thought, oh my God, I want you, Jenny, to be in the Awareness Podcast, because our listeners, they're just like you, and they're just like me. I was a general contractor for 35 years before I found my spiritual legs in the path of love that drew me to itself. And your story, Jenny, was so alive and so fresh. And so I wanted our listeners to be able to hear from someone that was really just like them, and just like we are before we find our spiritual path, whether it's A Course in Miracles or the non-dual teaching, or many other paths that are out there. And so just a little bit of your backstory, Jenny, that I was hearing before we went live on the book study that interested me was that you found the course. You have a history, and we'll probably get into some of the backstory, but on a professional level, you're a physician and a scientist. So tell us a little bit about how a physician, a scientist, and I don't know if you have a family or any of those things. I know you have an awesome dog who likes to bark while we're talking on the book study. So just give us a little bit of a backstory and how you came about finding your way to A Course in Miracles, and then the non-dual teaching that we're looking at in the Being Myself book study.
Sure. Yes. So funny, the thought that popped in my mind, you said backstory, and I'm like, oh gosh, but I'm tired of that story. I don't identify with it anymore, which is a miracle. But yes, I just plodded along through life and went to med school and did a residency in anesthesiology and practiced for 20 years, active private outpatient surgery center, very busy. And something happened. I got very closed to anything having to do with spirituality. I mean, there was even a stage that if Wayne Dyer was on the television, PBS, my husband might put it on, something almost like, and I would get that off. Get him off the television, and practically grabbing the remote. This is how closed I was. And another example is we were med students and went to see the movie The Matrix. And I sat in another part of the theater and fell sound asleep. I mean, unconscious. I look back on that now. I was so close to any idea of something beyond what my senses show me is real. I just crack up about that now. I mean, my friends had to wake me up and be like, Jenny, the movie's over. So I can giggle about it now, but and of course, I think The Matrix is a great movie, but so that cracks me up. But an underlying, on the outside, married, kids, the whole bit. I mean, part of my story is I have run almost every path. I've been down a lot of roads and taken them to their end point, and still this just underlying despair, like this can't be it. And my prayer at night was, please don't let me wake up. And I would say I kind of went through an agnosticism time. Grew up K through 12 Catholic school. I mean, we went to Mass every Sunday. I kind of in my 20s started realizing things didn't add up. And so then went into a really closed period to God or any concepts, spiritual concepts. But it wasn't until I did start going into 12-step AA rooms in 2013, and a phrase from the big book, happy, joyous, and free, really caught my attention. And something latched, I could say now, my true self latched onto that. And I was like, that's what I wanted. And this will that had propelled me to, a lot of highs and a lot of lows just shifted. And now I decided I really wanted that.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing I love about your what we were talking about in what I think we call the green room. The other part of that piece was as a physician, as someone that is a scientist, and also the word you used as agnostic, skeptic, I would say also.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That
oh yes,
that skepticism is it can be it can seem like it's a block, but it can also act as a catalyst for someone that that's skeptically willing to look, skeptically willing to take a peek, and from that actually makes someone who wants to prove something isn't true or real. It becomes a more powerful movement towards the thing that they're trying to prove is not real, because it gives you evidence that you didn't have before, and so for me, that statement is not only more powerful as a direct experience, it's also more powerful for people that are listening and watching and going, wow, how'd they go from that to that? Because that was Jenny, that was the thing that pulled me to A Course in Miracles, was, as a practicing Christian, and I think you call yourself a recovering Catholic.
Yes.
And for me, that the professional piece of it is what attracted me to A Course in Miracles, because Helen Schuckman was she was a professor. She was a psychologist. She had credentials of study, and she was a bit of an atheist.
Yes.
And that was attractive to me, because it gave me a sense of, okay, this is someone who didn't think this stuff was real. And now she's hearing a voice in her head and writing down what it says.
I totally can relate to that. And also, she didn't use it at all to make her living off of. It actually became something that she wasn't proud of and didn't want mentioned in her obituary. So as a scientist skeptic, that appealed to me, as it's easy to prove something's existence referring to itself, but to take something really, the Course was, well, first of all, I couldn't even read it. I could only experience it as dyslexia, which I had never had any learning issues in my life. And a voracious reader, I mean, from just always reading. And I could not read the text. It made no sense to me, and kind of set it down for just a short few weeks. And during that time, I got on the internet and I wanted to know what this course was. And that's how I found out a little bit of the backstory of the course and the scribes and how it got published. Just it all of a sudden appealed to me, because it was outside of the box from my Christian understanding that I had, grown up with. And it also appealed to me because of the Christian language. And in all my explorations in the Eastern religions and philosophies, there was a gap there in my understanding. So the course, as it says, the curriculum is one, the paths are many, and the course was my path. But after exploring what the course was for those few weeks, I basically said to Jesus, to God, to the universe, okay, expletive here, I'll do this stinking workbook. And I don't think it's going to work, and I don't believe in it, but you show me. I want what you're talking about, and let's see. And probably really less than halfway, something started to shift. And I didn't do it perfectly. And
halfway reading the course?
No, halfway through the lessons. I'd say probably around the 130s, something started to shift.
Okay, so halfway through, for you all that don't know, aren't familiar with the course. So the course has 365 workbook lessons, and then it has about 700 pages of text, and then it has a manual for teachers. It has a psychotherapy pamphlet, and it has a song of prayer pamphlet. So it has a lot of content, and you're about lesson 130 of the 365, and then pick it up from there.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. So my foray into the course started with the workbook, and with a very skeptical attitude. And I tried to do a lesson a day, but it wasn't a super priority. I did try every morning to do it before I left for work. And I'd say something happened by lesson 130 that I wanted to be doing these lessons. And yes, I completed the full 365 lessons. It took me probably about 16 months. Again, I did not do it perfectly with the way the course might make it sound. And the miracle was that something shifted in my mind, and I don't know what it was, but I wanted more of it. And then, of course, when I went back to the text after that year, more than a year, it started to make a little bit of sense. Like I could actually read it, and there wasn't, something had dissolved, that anti-Christ will, or that anti-God will, the blocks that had been there, or even to Sweet Wayne Dyer or the Matrix,
Yes.
had softened, and the words began to sink in. And I could say I really dug in the January of 2018, dug into a intense 3-year period of the course. And I joke with family and friends, like, oh, med school was the warm up for the course. Like, now I see, oh, med school prepared me so that I could hit the course the way I did med school studies. And not that it needs to be done that way. It was just the path that I had to go through. Just like you said, Bill, so many questions that something needed answers to. And of course, now we know they're just beliefs and changeable and really doesn't matter anyways, but it was exactly what I needed at that time. And love the course.
Yeah, I love I really love that approach, Jenny, because you're describing how the course, even if we don't believe it, if we don't agree with it, if we're skeptical, it has a way of dissolving, melting away, or softening, as you said, that resistance or that skepticism in the background by just doing the course. And all of a sudden, the mind shifts and it becomes more open to hearing. It becomes more open to listening and being open-minded, and so that a resonant truth can have a place that it can be heard. And that's what I'm hearing from you. And I love the idea that you approached it like like a med school student. Yeah.
It was absolutely an experiment, and I really it just cracks me up now, but I was really like, okay, Jesus, really, you show me.
Yeah.
I mean, I challenged him or it, because I didn't believe it at all.
Yeah. Well,
I wanted to, Bill, because what the promises of the course aligned with that, happy, joyous, and free. So I wanted it to be true.
Right. Well, and I think that's why it's important to know why the course is written in religious language, a lot of Christian language. It's written as an Eastern tradition. In fact, one of the scribes, Bill Thetford, said while he was still alive, he said that the Course in Miracles is a Western version of Advaita Vedanta. And, he was he was a professor, he was academic, and he really, when the course came into his experience, it was not something that he had the slightest interest in. And he was also a skeptic and a psychologist, but he was also, pretty smart. And when something came in on his radar, he would verify it, just like a scientist would, just like you would, just like you did. And for Christians, the course comes in with language and then begins to undo a lot of the myths that come from the Christian dogma, that come from the thousands of years of misscribing and
Yeah.
miswriting what was being transmitted. But there's enough Christian language in there from I was a past Christian, and there was enough Christian language in there to draw me in to say, wow, that take on that verse makes way more sense than what I've been told that means. And so it pulled me in as being a more logical reference to some of these spiritual ideas.
Absolutely. I also want to put a clarification. What I learned from my Catholic upbringing, I take responsibility for. It may not have even been what they were trying to teach me, but it was what I heard and learned from it.
Yeah.
And yes, the course, it is uniquely Western, like you said. And what maybe if anyone hears nothing is that it can be something that can be worked on. We can put effort and energy into a spiritual development, and results will happen. What I gathered trickled down from my forays into Eastern philosophies, that you're not supposed to seek, or that it just is. But when you're on the side of understanding even what that means at all, that's not helpful. But you can work on it and go for it and put the time and energy. And it's often just reading or skipping around on YouTube and listening to teachers. That's what's so wonderful about the internet now. And don't, if something pulls you to spend your time and energy, go for it. And only the separate self would say, but it's not something you're supposed to work at. I don't know. I disagree. And my story is, no, if it is related to desire, and if you feel the pull, just go for it.
The same intensity of desire that created a world is the desire to know our true nature.
I agree with you. Still fine tuning on the hows and stuff. And I do think what was appealing in both the course and coming into Rupert's teaching in non-dualism is the lack of what a spiritual life looks like. It's not true that you have to join a monastery or go to an ashram or meditate all day or sell all your stuff and follow some guru. Like, that's actually not true. And when I really get down to thinking about it, that's a perpetuation of a lie that it's undoable now. The kingdom of heaven is now, here, wherever you are.
Yeah.
And there's no, diets or special prayers, or, when you start thinking you have to do all these things, which I did, as a physician, feeling comfortable in my stuff, and with family, I have children and a husband that I adore, not wanting to, something really wanted to go and just do those things, because there's a little bit like, this means nothing to me anymore. And I want that. And so I had to, you step into discernment, which voice in my mind is talking. And I am very skeptical still of my voice sometimes, still in a period of discernment sometimes. Mm-hmm. That, the separate self just wants to take off and go to India. But that's not, I think, the world needs people all over exactly where they are, who know our true shared identity, as you said, the one infinite being of consciousness. And it's going to look different all over the place, all over the place. Ram Dass said it, the bus driver, the gardener, the teacher, the priest. I mean, we need all these different forms, as you mentioned, to share the content, which is multifaceted. I mean, the content is the same. The forms are multifaceted, and that's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you clarified that, because you don't, that part about the kingdom of heaven is here right now. It's not and you don't need a guru to get there. You don't need any special teaching. However, something like A Course in Miracles, something like a non-dual understanding can really support you in helping you to see beyond the traditional ideas, because we were lost. I mean, for thousands of years, we've been lost in the dogma of the Bible and other traditions that are like that just aren't true. And if you take that verse that I mentioned,
and you mean Western culture as a whole, or United States in particular. Yeah.
And if you take that verse about the rich young ruler, lots of people, like, you remember the Hare Krishnas and there's all of in the Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a lot of cults out there. And I think, I mean, I'm sorry if you're a Catholic, I think the Catholic Church is a pretty big cult, but I think that a lot of cults come out of those teachings, and you don't have to sell everything to find the truth and happiness, and the things that those things that, when you were talking about the 12-step, I think the 12-step program is probably the most powerful spiritual idea in the world that will draw people to the truth of their own essential self. The 12-step program is amazing. I haven't been in it, but I have had lots of friends and family that have been in it. And when I look at that, and I look at the teaching of A Course in Miracles or non-duality, it's high up there with them. And it influences millions and millions of people to look for an alternative to the disaster of life that they set up for themselves. This is a first answer that there's a power that's higher than themselves. There's a consciousness that overrides all experience in a bodysuit. I love the 12-step program.
Absolutely. And Bill, just thinking about it, really the big book for Alcoholics Anonymous was really the first text in this curriculum. And I believe that the world is a Mad Lib. Did you ever do Mad Libs?
Oh, yes.
You fill out the verbs and the nouns and the adjectives and you change it. I mean, that's what it is. My verbs and nouns and adjectives might be different than yours, but underneath it all, we're the same. So if you just took alcoholism out and you could put almost anything else in there, gambling, sex, food, exercise, all these, anything that you attach to, and no attachment is inherently bad. It's only if it is causing any suffering that it needs, all it is asking to be looked at. So even if no one does anything but say, hey, maybe I'll take a look at that big book, which is free online, and just take out the word alcoholism and put in there, obsession with good sleep or obsession with pure water. I mean, there's the myriad of them in this country. It's crazy. So, but yeah, just realizing the concept of a higher power of your own understanding,
Yes.
my own understanding, realizing I was allowed to deconstruct God and put together what maybe my relationship with God looks like. I mean, it's radical and it's wonderful. And another help for me during this time is listening to Alan Watts, who was a British man in the 60s and, kind of a beatnik. And there's lots of stuff in YouTube on him, but he just really went for the throat of the Christian Anglican teachings of sin, and really at the heart of so much of what I did was rooted in guilt. Bad this, bad that, and it just needed to all be undone.
Undone.
I can't blame the Catholic Church or my parents or teachers. I mean, I take full responsibility, but it just had to be undone.
Yes, yes. It was a good start. I'm grateful for all of the Christian teaching that brought us to where we are. I wouldn't have wanted to have been part of the Great Crusades. That looked brutal and awful, and I would not want to have been in that. So there's some fear.
They got a little off track. The Inquisition too comes to mind.
Oh man, but I'm grateful for it, because somehow consciousness, I mean, it knows what it's doing. We are where we are. And the good news is that nobody gets left behind. No, there's not one iota of personhood or this form of consciousness that isn't returning and going to have the direct experience of itself again. And so the good news is that nobody loses. I love that idea. Yeah.
Oh, that's the best. And because we are all one, truly all one, everything is for only good.
Yeah.
And the highest good for everyone involved. I suffered because I had this tiny sliver of perception, and it was a belief that I was alone and separate from everything else, and vehemently independent. I mean, to a fault independent. Of course, there's no faults, no sins, so it was just what it was. But what a relief to go through an open-minded experience into a sense of dependency and interdependence, and being willing to say, I don't know, and I don't understand how this is working. I mean, right now, with this stuff that's going on in the world, I don't understand how this all working, but I trust that it is for the highest good for all involved. And it's just
the Jenny, what you just said, I like. I just really want to mention that the ideas that are offered in the Course and the non-dual teaching, even though you just said that you trust that everything is unfolding as it should, these paths are not blind trust paths. They're not, even though concepts we begin with the concepts that lead to an understanding. And it's an understanding that you just described a few minutes ago as discernment of the experience. These concepts become they become imbued with an intelligence that is a visceral experience that we can call discernment, right?
Yes, beautiful. And that was part of what appealed to me was with my scientist background. And so that's hypothesis and theories and experiments and ruling out what doesn't fit. I I'm speaking from where I am now, but every step of the way, I almost had to go from sources outside of my primary text to verify its truth. And the thing I think that deeply appealed to me about the course is that it's based on logic and rational thinking. It's the use of intellect to take you to a spiritual place. And that appealed to my mind and what worked for me. It's almost, I think of the course as a series of essays, and each little section kind of a point is made with logical, both inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning, showing how a belief I might have is false, and then showing me how a new belief that the course is teaching can be true. And just the more that you open yourself, I mean, that's what's wonderful about beliefs. Beliefs can be changed. So ultimately there are no beliefs, and we're not going to matter. How did we get here? Ultimately, I think Jesus says, well, when you are able to know, you're not going to want to know. So that cracks me up.
Yeah.
Like when you're going to finally understand, you're not even going to care. So I'm not going to waste any time on that. That appealed to me too.
Right.
But yeah.
The way you just put that it moves beyond academics, but it uses academics to bring you to a conclusion that this must be true, and it gives someone the experience of testing it before they, without having to jump in. There's no blind faith when you get to that point of deductive reasoning.
Exactly. No, and that's my challenge I mentioned earlier to Jesus about doing the workbook. Is in the intro to the workbook, he literally says, you don't have to believe these ideas. You don't have to, just do them. Just try them, because since they're rooted in truth with a capital T, reality, God. I'm comfortable using the name God, but that's just a name, and the name of God has many forms. It does the work. And it starts with a little bit of willingness. I talked about this great drive and will and desire, but it started teeny tiny. Like I wanted it to be true. I did. I just wanted it to be true. And it was teeny tiny. And I kept that skepticism as long as I could. But when you start living with these ideas and they prove to be true, it becomes a very real experience.
Yes.
And Bill, I needed, when I first picked up Nature of Consciousness, I'm trained and practice in anesthesia. And so consciousness is always a thing. And I couldn't read Rupert from the beginning either, because I needed the course. I needed that background of slowly undoing false beliefs and thoughts that rattled around in my mind before I could even begin to understand what Rupert teaches and other non-dual teachers.
Yes.
Like Francis Lucille that you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, and I did too. I couldn't have started with Rupert's teaching, but I needed to end up there, because I needed to start with the Christian thing, because I first started that path and I was seeking God and Jesus, and was, very connected to that teaching. And when it wasn't panning out for me, when I started realizing just intuitively that God can't be fear and love at the same time, how is that possible? That those don't fit together. And I just knew that. And then how does God call some people's behavior an abomination so they don't have access to God? And what about these people that don't accept Jesus as their personal savior? They're just, they all go to hell. And it just, parts of it just didn't add up.
Yeah.
So I needed the course to undo the belief system and the dogma. And then when I got to the end, after finishing the course, probably 8 times, reading it cover to cover and doing the workbook lessons 8 complete times, I got to the point of going, okay, so when is how many people do you know reading the course that are awake? Well, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody that was actually had an awakening experience, even though the course points to it from all different directions. And it has a really great application of the psychological undoing. And as you said earlier, the softening comes in. And what happens is the course uses the back door into your psyche
Yes.
to remove the obstacles to the awareness of love's presence.
Mm-hmm.
And it just dismantles those obstacles. And if you're at the point when you've, after reading the course a time or two, if you're sufficiently removed the obstacles to the awareness of love's presence, now you're living in awareness of love's presence as a natural state. And the non-dual teaching comes in and says, okay, this is where you are. This is what you are. And for me, it came into a fertile ground of understanding that was ready to receive and live the non-dual understanding, to receive and live the direct experience.
Yes, I'm with you there, Bill. And my mind was ripe for the teachings when, as you mentioned, the book study a couple months ago, Being Myself, Rupert's latest book, amazing. And it's so direct experience is exactly true. Anyone listening to this right now knows what we're talking about, even if you don't think you do. And it's, for me, it really gave coherence to everything. And I was able to make that leap out of the intellect and into experiencing what it means to know your true self and the true nature of our relationship with God and everyone. It's amazing. And it's real. This love thing, it's the force of the universe. It's the energy. Quantum physics, there is no particulate matter. I mean, now we have subquark, over 200 of them. They're trying to name them all. And we will never find a particle of matter that exists. I love that. I'm like, well, they can keep looking as long as they want to. It's not going to be found, as we get more powerful and powerful electron microscopes. I mean, it's just hilarious because
Wow.
what the space is the real stuff. What we can't, what the body's senses don't show us is the power of the universe. And I call it love because it has such a beneficence that once you realize, man, it's really good, like super good.
Yeah.
It's a power and it's real.
Well, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. And although I love anesthesiologists,
Well,
I love you guys because I love that feeling when they're counting backwards and all of a sudden you're gone. You know, I don't know where
it's
you go, but it's a nice experience.
well, it's wild, Bill. Another podcast, how I got into that. But um, yes, we don't, this might be too much information. We don't know how anesthesia works. We just know that it does work because there is no locus of consciousness in the brain. It doesn't exist. So, what I do uh, in helping patients get through their surgery they need or their chronic pain needs, I it also adds up to everything that I've learned through my studies and stuff. I also do want to add, though, that it came to me clear as day one morning that it was time to hang up my stethoscope, and it wasn't when, but I one day driving into work, I knew that it was my last day of driving into work. This was about 2 years ago. And what happened, Bill, is I was noticing that I couldn't, in my costume as an anesthesiologist, I was inauthentically relating to patients with this idea that the surgery was going to help feel better. So I felt I was hearing that the problem really was in the way someone was thinking, and I just wanted. I'm putting myself out there. I don't know what's next for me, but I'm open and willing and wanting to be of use in healing. And
Wow.
yeah.
Well, that's a huge step to go from a doctor, anesthesiologist, to saying, I'm hanging up. I got this input, I got this intuition with a strong feeling that I'm I'm hanging up my stethoscope. That's pretty much like stepping off the cliff.
I know. And I still carry my stethoscope in my car, like if it's ever needed. I mean, I love what I do or did, and I may go back to that. I mean, I'm open to anything, but just realizing that to wherever I am is where I'm supposed to be, and just
Yeah.
being true to that. The whole authentic self. As you dig in spiritually, you actually realize your authentic self, and for me, found it even lovable when I was not that way for decades. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that even though you made a statement that said you don't have to sell everything and follow a guru and you don't have to do this or that, what I'm hearing and seeing is that there's a sense in which you realize that there's something about knowing the self that is so compelling that it draws you to a conclusion that you really need to investigate this understanding. And it would be good if you didn't sell all your stuff. I mean, this is just my opinion. It would be good if you do the investigation first, because that's the only thing that the yearning to know it's coming online, and you end up finding yourself saying, well, I'm going to hang up my stethoscope and for now, because I want to follow this pull and see what it is. I want to experience something that feels like it's very real. And I did the same thing. I was a general contractor. I stopped doing all of that. But then I find that now that I am no longer seeking, I know the truth that sets us free. I know the I am as awareness, as presence. And now I may build a house, I may do this or do that, and those skill sets come back in, but I do it living from a whole new place of being. So we don't know, but but
That's awesome.
Your heart does ring true to draw you to discover the I am presence. It draws you to the self-awareness, to self-beingness. And then from there, you just go about your way from with a whole new set of understanding, and you will influence everything that you come in contact with from there.
Exactly. Just doing what I'm doing right now. I'm enjoying life. I think there's a fullness in living that I wasn't aware of before. And I call it a pilot light of hope. And if anyone listening has that feeling, that sense, that deep down inside, whatever you want to call it, that it's true and real, and just listen and follow. No particular path, no particular curriculum dictated. It will dictate itself to you, but just to know that the living as a person in time and space with a name and a job, and it is not what it's all about. Who can squirrel up the most nuts in a vault. The absurdity. Certainly it can seem senseless sometimes, and just like you said, it's senseless in a good way, and it's all part of it. And not to judge it, but that if when I thought the world was senseless and pointless, and had decades of chronic suicidal ideation, there was just a sense there has to be something more to living. And the good news is there is. So
yeah. So the name of this show, besides the Awareness Podcast, is Living the Non-Dual Understanding. And so we're talking about living this non-dual understanding, living the I am that I am experience that the Course points to. The non-dual direct path not only resonates to, but the non-dual direct path, and the thing that brought us together was being myself. It's that understanding of being myself is right here.
Yeah.
Right now in this direct experience. And, Rupert's next book that we're going to start in April is called You Are the Happiness That You Seek.
Oh, I love that title.
Yeah, You Are the Happy. That's his next book. It's not on. I think you can pre-order it right now, but that's the next book study. You Are the Happiness That You Seek. This is I feel that we're on this ladder of awakening, and these are just rungs on the ladder, because this understanding just is expansive and ever growing into itself. And the non-dual understanding is the vehicle that is being used to bring us there. If you could take us for a minute, what do you see the cause or the experience of the shift going from A Course in Miracles to the non-dual understanding. How has that worked out for you? Can you describe that?
Sure, I will try. Again, I will take responsibility for what I learned and heard, regardless of maybe what I was taught by teachers, and that there was a couple things that fell short to me from what I gathered from the course. And I love the course, and I still find myself reading it every day. So I'm no interest in cutting that out. But that there seemed to, I understood it as like that the world is not real, and that there's this place of realness that's called heaven, and we're all spiritual beings there. And that didn't quite sit with me, because that didn't jive with the kingdom of heaven is now kind of thinking. And that as long as there's any fishing pole with a big fat worm sticking on the end of it, some promise in the future, that's not what it's about. So that was the one part that was echoing for me. And the non-dual teaching is definitely that it is here and it is now. And of course, when you dig into the Hindu and Buddhist and Zen teachings, are all about that it's right here and now. Like washing the dishes after dinner, I can experience the joyful peace that I am. And that ties into the second thing about the course. I kind of came away with this idea that I was supposed to have some kind of special function, some kind of thing that I was supposed to do in the world, and which is true. All our functions are special. There's not less, one function less special than another, but the idea that it was not what I'm doing right now. And I understood that mistakenly, because whatever it is that anyone is doing right now, and it could be taking the recycling bin to the curb. I mean, it's what you're supposed to be doing right now. And so then I learned that there was kind of like these body things that the ego drives, and they're sort of not good things to do, not sins, but not good things to do. And that there were the other things, and they were spiritual. And although there's no picture of what that spiritual being looks like, but I knew I can't just read the course all day. How is that going out there? So the non-dual teachings really brought that. And particularly, I think, just in the chapter we just did, when you really take non-dualism to its end, what starts as a desire for personal spiritual growth and development becomes this mechanism for reaching out to everyone and everything everywhere. And you realize that just by cleaning up my curb, to use that expression, changes and echoes out through the ether sphere to, this sounds, flighty, but, to raise the vibration of everyone. And that's my special function. Doesn't matter right now. It's looking like walking the dog, running errands, occasionally teaching a class, but just sitting there and being cool with it.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, Jenny. Thank you for being a guest on the Awareness Podcast. And thank you, everyone, for being with us. Jenny, do you have any final goodbye words?
No, just Hello, welcome. I mean, I love you all.
Good. All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Bill.
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.